Hi, everybody. I am at my sister's place in Vernon and taking a couple of days off, but I thought I'd still do a little talk, little message. And I'm starting to read and study in James, the book of James, and it starts off talking about faith. So after the first little greeting that he gives, um, he's talking about faith, and we had discussed this in Hebrews, where there's these examples of people who had faith throughout the Old Testament. And the theme was their faith was in things that were invisible, promises that were almost impossible to keep. They interfered with life. Uh, Noah builds an ark for years and years and years because he had faith that God was telling the truth, and so on and so forth. It's the faith is the key thing that we believe saves us, not works, but faith. And so James starts off uh, with an introduction and then starting in verse 2. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. It goes on, but I just want to focus on that. Uh, because faith is so important, uh, it is key to have it. It is our access point to the grace of God, saved by grace through faith. That's Paul's mantra. And it's really important to understand how God wants us to gain faith. Because for James, it is experience. It is the process of experience that we gain trust and faith in God. So, how do we get that experience? Well, we don't get it from having everything go right. As a matter of fact, we're more prone to learn through really awful things where we don't know where to turn and we don't know what to do, and we feel in danger or stressed, or things aren't going our way, and we start to ask where God is. And it is the experience that makes us firm, that makes our faith firm. We find out, we taste and see that the Lord is good, and we learn to have faith in it, so that when we do hit a bump in the road, um, we have something to fall back on. Now, this brought to mind uh, when I went to Nigeria to teach. On my way out, and this is a long, and I'll skip over it, but the British Airways was banned from Nigeria, and that was my flight out. So I went to Lagos Airport. I flew to Lagos Airport, and I had booked a seat and everything. And every time I tried to get on the plane, somebody with more money would just buy the seat out from me, and they were very apologetic. A mistake has been made, but everybody knew how it worked. You bribed your way onto the plane, and I didn't have any money. So I was there for 2.5 days in the airport, um, and no sleep, no sleep. You couldn't sleep because I discovered that there were bandits everywhere, and if you went to sleep, and especially if you were white, you would wake up with nothing. They'd just take your luggage and whatever cash they had, and there was no recourse. There's no police force there. You couldn't complain about it. And I learned very quickly to go to certain parts of the airport at certain times, um, just to protect myself. And there was a few of us that were sort of waiting this out. And finally, after 2.5 days, and I was just stressed. I had to sign a little form, um, for immigration or something like that, and I could barely sign my name. My hands were shaking, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get on the plane. Um, and I had heard, somebody told me that you have to get by um, the military, and they interview everybody that goes through, and they just take your stuff. If you've got something they want, they'll just take it. And I had a little printer and a computer, and all my stuff was there. And I thought, oh, this is gonna be bad. And then. So I come up to these two soldiers, and they asked me what I had been doing, and I said, well, I taught at Samuel Bill Theological College in the back, and uh, it turns out that I had preached at a church about 1.5 miles from the campus. And that's where this guy grew up. And he said, oh, you're the white guy that preached at my mother's church. And Nigeria had what, 120 million people, and this was a backwater place in the jungle. Um, anyway, I realized as I'm getting on the plane, my relief at being out of there, out of that stressful situation was overwhelming. And I just realized, oh, God's looking out for me. Um, and kept looking out for me. For instance, I got onto the plane, and when it took off, I went to go to the bathroom, and I had a pouch, a fanny pack, and and it had like all my ID, my passports, everything was in there, and I had left it in in the washroom, which you just don't do. And the stewardess came up to me and said, "Is this your wallet?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And she said, "You don't know how lucky you are to get this back." So I was humbled. And the thing was that for those 2.5 days, I was praying nonstop. I was praying continually, begging God, no, just get me out of here, get me a seat, do something. And the whole time, God was in control of the situation. And it allowed me to face a lot of things afterwards with a certain amount of confidence. Not that I felt like nothing bad could happen to me, but that I knew that God was always in the picture. We don't gain that if we live a life, and especially because James is gonna talk about wealthy people, we don't learn that kind of faith when we have faith in our ability to buy our way out of a situation, or be very, very careful and live a life of total safety. We never learn. We always are little babies. And I think that's what James is getting at here is just um, the whole idea of that experience being the thing that we can rest our faith on. And what gets in the way of our experiencing those things, we avoid everything that could be dangerous or doubtful, or we like security. And God wants us to find our security in Him, so that we can be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing.